going on there, citizens of the Reject Nation? We just got out of IMAX watching Beetlejuice. The juice is loose.
The juice is loose.
While you're here,
Leave a like on this video. It'd be very much appreciated.
so the trailers, surprisingly, like even though the trailers seem to show a lot, they really don't show a lot of what actually goes on in this film, including one very specific plot line that's really key and important to the adventure that takes place. So as you see in the trailer, the catalyst for everyone going back into the town and the house is there's a death in the family that causes to go back to the original house. Nostalgia ensues. There's this adventure with Beetlejuice that's very important, but the plot doesn't reveal it, that involves Jenna Ortega. Let's see if this movie is at all worthy of existing here in the movie sphere.
Taking up the Beetlejuice mantle and continuing it.
I'd say that, you know, there's plenty of good things in the movie. One thing that I feel is refreshing is kind of the most obvious thing that people can say. Tim Burton back with a lot more of the practical effects that we know him for. The movie is way more violent than I expected it to be.
Sure,
It's
yeah.
like actually violent.
At times, yeah, and there's
Yeah.
certainly like actual gore gags amid the more whimsical, you know, like PG-friendly gore gags.
And that was like fun to behold. Even though the movie's kind of messy, and I'll go into some reasons of why I thought so in a bit, I cannot deny the fact that I did have genuine fun just succumbing to the world yet again and exploring more of the afterlife. It is just such a fun world to be a part of, and I feel like Tim Burton genuinely had fun putting that together. You could tell the whole cast had fun being a part of this as well. And Michael Keaton, of course, as Beetlejuice, doesn't skip a beat playing this role, not one bit. Being back into the world of it, that is the best highlight of the film to me. The zaniness, the macabre humor, the darkness, and the practical effects, and the music. I was like, yeah, I love being thrusted into here. And there was a couple of surprising plot lines that I feel like some might call predictable. Call me a dumbass. I didn't find it predictable. Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, in hindsight, I was like, that's obvious. I should have predicted that. Plenty of great things. I mean, do you think so?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the cast is really all having fun and all really up to the challenge. Everybody understands the assignment, and yeah, the mixture of stop motion animation effects, of interesting props and makeups, and just the, you know, expressionist wildness of, you know, the neither world, so to speak, is a joy to behold and to get wrapped up into. And it's a movie that takes place at Halloween time, so it's, you know, that's something that always plays well to me as a just kid who always has loved that time of year. It's not necessarily a perfect return. It's not like Tim Burton doesn't have any form left to return to. I think certainly he's got a little bit more to go before he really reclaims that classic status that we all know and love of his. Yeah, it's not like Tim Burton, man, didn't miss a beat. He's back, baby.
No,
like,
because a big part of Tim Burton is the heart and the wonder of the older Tim Burton. That's not really in this movie.
Not as much.
Even the first Beetlejuice had that.
Yeah.
And that's not really, like, aesthetically it's all there, but the heart and the wonder, it's weird. It's like you'd think it would be there, but it's not quite there. It's reaching for it, but it doesn't quite soar.
There's one thing the first movie does that this movie does not so much do that I think might have benefited it, because you do, I think, for this need some kind of like mostly benevolent and enjoyable eye line through all this, rather than, you know, a bunch of characters who are all antisocial, misanthropic, and or insincere or something like that. Like in the first chunk of the movie, it's not quite as endearing the way like the original one is when you're getting to know Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis, but once it unfolds and you get into the meat of it, there's certainly enough to enjoy, and certain characters do give you more dimension than is on display at the outset, which is good. While it does feel kind of episodic a bit, or like kind of a bunch of beats and pieces kind of all jumbled together, there's a Frankensteinish nature about this whole thing that makes that feel more appropriate than not appropriate, I would say.
I would say in the first maybe like 30 minutes of this movie, I did have that question in my head pop off, because there's a lot of plot lines happening. Where exactly is this movie going? I don't know what we keep checking in this plot. I don't know what this plot really is going to factor into. Ultimately, there's a good chunk of like most of Act 2 and the beginning of Act 3 that is the best part of the film. It's going to be aspects of the movie that Beetlejuice fans showed up for, what Tim Burton fans showed up for. That being said, when it comes time for the convergence of all the plot lines, for the resolve to happen on some of the plot lines, a couple of them felt very rushed. rushed. A couple of them just kind of feel like they just drop it when it seemed like such a major setup of the movie, like such an important part of it.
The movie definitely has a weird handling of its internal stakes. It's not like there are no stakes, but there are choices that get made throughout that do at least make the stakes feel a little less pertinent, I guess, and a little less, urgent.
Don't get me wrong, it's not confusing. It just takes a while before you realize, oh, this is what the plot of the movie is.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes a little time to lay its vision out for you.
I think Jenna Ortega, great as always, and she is definitely at least second main character, if not the main character of the film.
Yeah.
Winona Ryder comes back to be a little bit like quirky and skittish this time,
Yes.
Sometimes she's kind of overdoing it a little bit.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. I mean, like that's one of those things that too is in the language of the filmmaking, where there'll be moments here or there where it's like, oh, they held on that a little long, and it does feel a little broad, or it does feel a little bit, I don't know, like the illusion isn't fully tied together or something like that. It's still very much enjoyable to watch her perform.
And I think Katherine Hepburn probably got the biggest laughs out of the whole theater.
Oh yeah, she's a treasure. She, of everybody, kind of slipped most effortlessly back into a prior role. Not that there are a million returning characters, but she felt like she had not skipped a beat whatsoever, and there's not as much updating you have to do with so many years later. Who is this character now?
And Justin Theroux gets a lot of screen time.
That
Did
he
not
do.
expect that. Sometimes you're like, is this kind of overstaying its welcome here? But there were plenty of times where it was like reasonably funny to me.
He's here to serve the purpose, the contrasting purpose in this movie of the yuppie, modern person, sort of encroaching upon their life as such that it is. I get that they're trying to harken back to that thread of the original movie because they're yuppies moving into the house that Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin have so lovingly set up, and they're kind of wrecking it with their taste. And here I could feel them going for that with him, but it didn't feel quite as knowing as it did in the previous movie. It felt a little bit more broad, a little bit more like, oh, we're going to make this character to lampoon him, and he's going to be a joke rather than a character who is a bit pretentious and silly.
Yeah, and Winona Ryder's blindness to him was a little
concerning.
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like Lydia would probably.
How could you not? Yeah.
Yeah. The movie doesn't not try to explain it, but just given, what we know about her, it does feel a little unlikely.
And Willem Dafoe, he's game. Willem Dafoe is game in this movie. He's having
fun.
so much fun in this movie, man.
Absolutely. It's fun to watch. I can't deny that he's fun to watch. I maybe wish that his plot line was a little bit more of consequence, but he's a very fun, comic strip happening throughout the movie.
There's literally one plot line here that feels of consequence, and it's one that involves Jenna Ortega.
Absolutely.
And the rest is kind of like a hodgepodge of watching, I don't know, the Beetlejuice animated show or something.
It feels like episodes of a cartoon or a bunch of sketches set in this
honestly,
world.
saying that, I can see people who haven't seen it being like, well, that sounds like a great time. And honestly, like I said, the flaws are so apparent, but it is the returning to the world that you get the most glee from. It was one of those experiences where I'm like, this movie's definitely flawed in its storytelling. It's such a unique feeling. Like the Beetlejuice world, there's nothing like it. You can't compare it to anything else. You can't reference any other films other than the last Beetlejuice movie.
Yeah, and there's some fun expansions on that.
Exactly.
Even though it's not the most expansive, it is like the most fun and enjoyable and whimsical when they are just expounding on the strange protocols and officers of the neither world.
Yeah, and I will say, for one of those nostalgia sequels, I think this is one of the better ones. Sometimes these nostalgia sequels, they're nothing but that, but I at least appreciate that they took a lot of time to really expand upon something. Like, a lot of the nostalgia can be just, yep, that is the first Beetlejuice, huh? But there's plenty of other things where I feel they've earned their passage onto the silver screen for this movie.
Yeah, it's like anything that we've seen Beetlejuice do in the past that he may or may not do again here feels motivated by the character, and there are only a handful of scenes where it is like, oh, we're going to recreate a classic type of moment or something. But there is, a whole lot else that just feels like you're back in the madcap world here, and that's enough to kind of necessitate all this. So it could be way more member-berry-ish, even though I'm sure, your mileage will vary, reviews will vary in terms of how member-berry-ish you think it is. Your mileage will vary on that aspect. But there's certainly a lot there for you if you love that first movie.
1000%. I guess if I were to slap a random rating on this movie, 7 out of 10, I guess.
Yeah, 6.5, 7. Not too bad.
Well, guys, that's it for us. Go watch Beetlejuice, and leave us your
Don't
thoughts.
say it one more time,
Go
G.
watch. It's not real, and I am sick of
I'm not
everyone at
chancing
this
it.
theater making that goddamn
not
joke.
chancing it. I'm not chancing it.
You guys are ruining Beetlejuice
I'm not
for me,
chancing. Oh, you said it.
and nothing's happening.
That
All you
yeah,
dumbasses
when we
at
get
the
in the
theater,
car.
just don't shut up with your dumb. Don't say it 3 times. Yeah, you know what? I stood in front of the mirror.
Candy
I
Man.
said Bloody Mary a billion
Candy
times.
Man.
Bloody Mary never showed up, and
Candy
neither will
Man.
Beetlejuice. Y'all can suck it.
Candy Man.
Suck it.
Candy Man.